On this edition of Independent Sources, we are not a virus. How the city's West African immigrants and wider African community are battling the stigma associated with Ebola.
We're concerned about, again, the stigmatization that will become inherent and is really becoming, it's the new addition to the problem now.
And Annie Undocumented, a new web series deals with the drama and comedy in the life of an undocumented immigrant.
People are saying that it's not a subject that they've thought about in this way before, and we hope to be able to entertain people and make them think about something as a hot topic in a new way.
Those stories and more coming up on Independent Sources. Welcome to Independent Sources, bringing you news from New York's ethnic and immigrant communities. I'm Abi Ishola. Concern about the spread of Ebola around the country is growing despite the Centers for Disease Control's strongest reassurances. Parents are keeping their children away from school, and there have been calls to freeze flights from West African countries to the United States. Here in New York City, things are growing particularly tough for Liberians. Staten Island is home to the largest Liberian community outside of that country, and they're already feeling the bite of the stigma that's fast being attached to their community. I sat down with Sheikh Musa Drame, the co-founder of the African Union Day Foundation, and Bobby Digi of the Staten Island-based Island Voices, Inc. We spoke about how the Liberian and African community at large are dealing with the Ebola virus. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Before we begin our conversation, I'd like the audience to know that we did reach out to the Department of Health to be a part of this discussion, but a representative was not available. They did release a statement to us that read, in part, "The Health Department's newly created Center for Health Equity has led outreach efforts citywide to reach many faith and community leaders and organizations in every borough with a particular focus on working with our partners in West African communities. Our partnerships have proven invaluable in helping the Health Department develop educational materials and messages that are both culturally and linguistically appropriate, in addition to learning the best ways to share the information with our communities." So, Sheikh, I'll start with you. Can you give us an idea of what people are feeling in the community now, in the Liberian community? Are they afraid for their families back home?
Well, yes, you see, this is a disease that scares the entire world. You see, you deal with, some problems that, doesn't usually affect the healthcare providers, but, a situation where those who would provide, life-sustaining services, are the ones, to be affected first, really scares not only the Liberians, but the entire West African community, here and I'm sure back home.
Yeah. So are people afraid of new immigrants coming in? Have you heard anything about that?
Well, people are afraid of a lot of things. I mean, a person comes from West Africa, you don't know, what to think of it, especially in light of, what happened in Texas. So people are concerned, and people don't know, who they should associate with or not, and it's a legitimate concern.
And Bobby, we hear on Staten Island there's a large Liberian market that's losing some business.
Yes, so Staten Island has the largest Liberian population outside of Liberia. And so there is a marketplace that I actually helped create that recently, in light of the Ebola epidemic, the media descended on the market. And a lot of media. When
you say the media descended on the market, do you mean they came in to report?
They came in to report. So in coming to report, the constant, and I mean, probably about maybe 20, 25 that I was there at the time that they arrived on different occasions. What it's done is it's really sort of heightened the hysteria, and when people see cameras, they don't, it sort of turns people. So it's impacted their marketplace in that way. And the women themselves who run the market, who have businesses there, have become overwhelmed by just excessive inquiries, and the media is constantly being there.
So are people not talking to the media anymore? At the
Well,
market?
they've gotten to that burnout stage. I know that I had to re-explain to the market women that it's actually in their best interest that they can get their perspectives out, so
Yeah.
that sort of changes the stigma that's out there, and the discrimination, the stigmatization that's going out, you know. So yes, it has impacted the market.
And how so? Are people not shopping anymore?
Well, so you have this population within you have the African American and the Africans side by side, and when the camera's on, people are curious, and they've been hearing about Ebola, so they don't know if there's been an incident there or not, and it has sort of created an uncomfortable environment because it's contributed to the other communities looking at this particular community, Liberian population, as if something is going to happen. And while I was there, while CNN was actually interviewing the president of the Liberian Association, Aretha Besman, someone actually went by and said, "Oh, we don't want any Ebola over here,"
Wow.
So, and that happened live. And it's not new. I was at the forum with the health department on Friday, and someone stood up and asked a question while, the majority there were West Africans. "Oh, why hasn't the federal government shut down the borders?"
Wow.
So those kind of insensitive statements and comments really they contribute to really stressing people who have lost family members. And we're concerned about, again, the stigmatization that will become inherent and is really becoming, it's the new addition to the problem now.
Yeah. What about the West African community as a whole? Are they fearing that there will be loss of business in other markets, or?
Well, we've been hearing many stories of, non-West Africans and Africans who typically would patronize like African stores, African businesses, sort of doing a double take. I mean, second guessing whether it's safe to go into these establishments, because at some point people thought the virus was airborne, and they were not too aware of some of the the symptoms or the ways that you can contract the virus. But I think that now the messaging that we've been sending out is, this is how you get it. It isn't as easy as you think it is. That the community, the West African community, is actually working very closely to the different agencies to sort of ensure that we don't have an incident like in Texas where someone unknowingly arrived and sort of came in contact with different people. So there's been this galvanization of the community and this awareness that's being created, and from the town hall meeting, the forum that was held with the health department, they've concluded that they will set up a center, an Ebola information center and training center, so that will empower the West African community there to sort of help, get the message out and just calm people's anxieties.
So Sheikh, I know you've been working with some organizations. What exactly have you been doing with the different organizations?
Yes, absolutely. We're working with the Sierra Leonean, Nurses Association, which has a branch here, in New York, and we're also working with Guinea Met. Is Guineans of different ethnic group, all in a medical field, helping their Guinean counterparts here as well as in Guinea. And we're also working with several Liberian organizations, but most of them refer us to the Doctors Without Borders. So because for some reason they believe that it is better to channel whatever service or whatever help through them, because since they already have the infrastructure there long before Ebola, rather than, some of these initiatives that, when the camera is on, they will show that they're providing it, but they really don't have the mechanism, for proper service delivery. Yeah. So these are the, entities that we're dealing with. And in New York City, locally, the Department of Health is working very closely, with the West African community and the Advisory Council, the United African Coalition, and various other African entities that are viable and that are able to provide, as he said, proper message. Mm-hmm. Because the problem with the African community is always, the messaging. You have so many diverse languages, and unfortunately, the messenger may not always, carry the message accordingly. Yeah. But at least now, we're getting to a point where, in Staten Island, in the Bronx, in Manhattan, they are entities that are able to channel a unified message, to the community, as well as, retrieve messages from the community to appropriate agencies. So that's what we have been doing.
Okay. So Sheikh Musa Dramé and Bobby Digi, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. We're glad to be here.
Thank you. Still to come on the show, a web series that adds some levity to a very serious subject. Before that, Crystal Lowe has some other news.
Thanks, Abby. Here's a look at some headlines from New York's ethnic and community media. From the World Journal, many job placement agencies in Chinatown are finding it hard to fill job openings at restaurants, nail salons, and supermarkets. Mr. Zhang, who is in charge of a job placement agency in Chinatown, says there are more and more restaurants and nail salons, but fewer new immigrants are willing to take the jobs that are difficult and tedious or require long hours. The paper reports that employers have started to change their management styles in order to maintain a steady staff of workers. For example, many restaurants no longer hire kitchen assistants because they're paid so little. Now the kitchen duties are divided amongst the entire kitchen staff, and all employees are paid at the same level. A coalition of grassroots organizations working in the Black, Latino, and Asian communities recently got together to hold a training seminar to revitalize cop watch patrols that help civilians keep an eye out on police conduct. The workshop was a second in a series of such sessions organized by People's Justice for Community Control and Accountability. Gotham Gazette reports, with the implementation of smartphone use, the workshop illustrated how video and audio recording help create a virtual paper trail of police activity more efficiently. The training also consisted of crash courses on the law and role-playing, where community members acted out different scenarios they could possibly encounter in real life. Long Island Press reports that Suffolk County officials and LGBT activists have announced plans to build a 55 rental unit housing complex for LGBT seniors in Bayshore, making it the first of its kind in the tri-state area and the fifth in the nation. A U.S. Housing and Urban Development report released in June 2013 found that heterosexual couples receive more favorable treatment than gay couples in the online rental housing market. Activists hope that the housing complex will provide a safety net for seniors as they make their way through their golden years. The complex will be built on the current site of the LGBT Community Center in Bayshore. Proposals for the project will be put before the county legislature on November 8th. And finally, more Korean restaurants are offering up snack foods at cheaper prices to attract new customers. The Korea Daily reports that new restaurants in Koreatown, in Midtown Manhattan, are spicing up their menus with side dishes such as bulgogi, galbi, and bibimbap. These items, known as snack foods, are offered at lower prices and have begun to attract more customers. Gray Street, a coffee shop in Koreatown, is a perfect example of how Korean snack food has boosted sales. Unlike the bulk of coffee shops offering bread and cakes, Gray Street is attracting customers with a typical Korean-style donut called horyok. Those were just a few headlines from the city's ethnic and community media. Independent Sources will be right back.
Thanks for staying tuned. The plight of undocumented immigrants in the United States is often a serious, if not somber, story. They're usually tales of impoverished immigrants struggling to live in or to travel to this country. But a new web series, Annie Undocumented, is taking a bit of a different turn on the subject. Gary Pierre-Pierre spoke to the series co-creator and director, Daniel Shah, about the show's origins and what they hope to accomplish with the series.
Daniel Shah, welcome to Independent Sources. Before we start the conversation, let's look at the trailer from your series.
Hey, Annie.
Hey!
Pop quiz, hand signals, left turn, right turn, slow down. Oh, perfect.
The DMV lady punched in my social and looked at me like I was some kind of criminal or something.
What?
Jen, I'm an illegal immigrant.
I failed my exam the first time, too.
Failed? Who are you lying to and why?
I need advice.
You called us because we must all be experts in illegal immigrants.
What is going on with you? If you're cheating on me, just admit it.
No, I'm not.
Hide!
Why should you vote for me instead of Rachel Jimenez? She's been deported for being an illegal immigrant, so it's not like she could fulfill her duties anyways. Vote Megan! I don't hear any clapping.
Danielle, tell us about this series, why it came about. How it came about.
Absolutely. So the show came about because a very good friend of mine, Elaine Lowe, she's a journalist. She told me that she was undocumented as a youth and a teenager growing up. And given what I know about her now, that she's smart and she's put together and she's got a great career, this was all very surprising to me. And the more I learned about her story, the more interested I became in what undocumented youth must go through. And so Elaine and I decided to collaborate and write this show about a teenage girl very similar to her who makes this discovery.
You know, it's interesting because the teenage years are probably the toughest years of anyone's life.
Exactly.
Tell us about working on this show and how you capture something so serious and yet trying to make it, so the average viewer can enjoy and understand it.
Absolutely. I mean, and you're right. High school years are hard enough for teenagers already, but at the same time, everyone knows that experience. And so what we decided to do was make a show about a teenager who already has, boyfriend problems, friend problems, friends who don't get along, drama with mom and dad, and then add on top of all of that this discovery that is not something that's just socially unacceptable, but legally unacceptable. And, we tell teenagers all the time, yes, high school is tough, but just be yourself, be honest, and you'll get through it. But the fact is that with undocumented youth, you can't, if you're an undocumented youth, you can't come out and tell everybody, oh, I have no papers, my family's here illegally, because depending on, how people around you will react, they could call the police, you could be rounded up and deported, and your life as you know it would be over.
How popular is the show? I mean, what kind of feedback you get from the audience?
So the show, we're actually here in New York to premiere the show at the New York Television Festival, and we're going to go live on our website, andtheundocumented.com, the same day. So that's when everyone will be able to watch it. But we've offered some previews of it to immigration activists and some journalists and filmmakers of various ages, and the positive response has been very overwhelming and something we've been very glad to hear. People are saying that it's not a subject that they've thought about in this way before, and we hope to be able to entertain people and make them think about something as a hot topic in a new way.
I read from Pew Research Center did a study documented about 750,000 children in that situation. That was in 2012. Mm-hmm. Has that number increased or stayed the same in the last couple of years?
Based on the research that we've done, we believe that there are somewhere around 1 million undocumented Americans under the age of 18 currently in the United States. And the College Board actually estimates that 65,000 undocumented teenagers graduate from college every year. Now, that's 65,000 teenagers who have no access to federal financial aid, might be unlikely to go to college as a result. And these are kids who could be very high achievers, sometimes valedictorians of their schools, and they graduate from college and all of a sudden they realize, okay, my future options are so limited. What am I going to do with my life? And it seems unfair that undocumented youth who came to this country not of their own accord.
Well, there's been a lot of controversy in state houses and in Washington regarding they call
Mm-hmm.
them the Dreamers. Mm-hmm. And what is your hope with this series? Do you hope to change the conversation on this topic?
Absolutely. We hope that, listen, this is a web series. It's, as you said, it's a dramatization of our writers' real-life experiences. We hope to entertain people, but at the same time, maybe some of the people who are watching it and think of, and see, oh, well, wow, this girl, she's actually just like me, except now she has this dilemma that there actually is no solution to. There is no path to citizenship for undocumented Americans. President Obama did sign the Deferred Action Childhood Arrivals Act.
Well, he said after the midterms in
Right.
November 4th,
Yes.
big change are coming.
Right.
Hopefully he will address that.
Yes, I've been listening to a lot of that talk, and everyone's very hopeful that there will be some sort of comprehensive immigration reform, but it's really hard to guess these kind of things because it was supposed to happen sometime this summer, but then there was the child arrivals
From Central America.
from Central America that changed the whole political dynamic of it, and so it's really a difficult topic that there's not a great answer to.
You know, immigration, I don't know why, but it has become a third rail of American politics, and I just don't understand why.
Yeah, I think it's because, you know, listen, as the Jon Stewart on The Daily Show had a great bit about it that I identified with strongly because my parents were immigrants who came to this country from
where?
From China and Taiwan. But Jon Stewart had a great bit about it, which was that, you know, it's a nation of immigrants, but as soon as you get here, you want the new immigrants to stay out. So it's a very interesting dynamic that we have here because, you know, the United States is a nation of immigrants. The Statue of Liberty, you know, bring us your poor, tired, huddled masses. But at the same time,
unless they're white.
Yes, exactly. But unless they're the wrong color, right? But it's a tough question because, you know, we want to, for our children's sake, be able to preserve all the greatness that the United States has. But then, what does that mean? Does that mean we bring in everyone, regardless of where they came from or what their situation might be? It's a really difficult question.
Now, getting back to your series, how long is it, and how long you hope to run it? How many pilot series do you have on?
Right. So we shot 8 short webisodes that we've decided to present in 2 segments, and it serves as both, you know, sort of a launching point for a web series, but also potentially as a TV pilot presentation.
Did you ever consider going straight to television with this, or?
This was something that we decided to do sort of on our own so that we could do it our own way. And at the same time, I think that you know, industry people have been slowly starting to pay attention to it, and we hope that they'll be able to see more of it.
Well, congratulations and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Daniel Shah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
When we come back, a little history on Pope Francis's philosophy. Finally from us, recently the Catholic Church was in the headlines for its softening on the issue of same-sex couples. It's a move many see as reflecting Pope Francis's leadership and call for a more modern church. In light of that, we thought we'd revisit Judith Escalona's piece on Liberation Theology. It's the philosophy that has driven much of the Pope's teachings over the years.
When Pope Francis invited the Reverend Gustavo Gutierrez to the Vatican, the Roman Catholic world shook. Gutierrez is the author of A Theology of Liberation, a controversial church doctrine focusing on the poor and making their needs central to religious practice.
A liberation theology doesn't speak about the importance of faith, what, say, a Christian, if we're talking about a Christian liberation theology, what a Christian does in the world today, ignoring things like poverty, injustice, racism. It doesn't leave things for the afterlife, but liberation theology puts the quest for human liberation at the center of the Christian mystery that is called salvation.
It is this core belief in tackling problems directly here on earth, of seeking justice in the here and now, that has made liberation theology and its movement threatening to the status quo.
It's been the biggest issue, telling people, doesn't matter you don't have something to eat, doesn't matter you don't have a job, doesn't matter you don't have a decent salary, doesn't matter you don't have a house, doesn't matter they are oppressing you. Keep hanging there, because in the future, in that place that we call heaven, you're going to find the solution to the problem. this is wrong.
So wrong that many priests and their followers have been murdered for addressing the root causes of poverty and injustice. During the 1970s in El Salvador, for example, priests preached a gospel that empowered their poor parishioners to seek social and economic justice. Through community-based faith groups, the message of liberation spread. Their peaceful demonstrations were met with violent government and right-wing repression that left thousands dead. Among them, the man known as the voice of the voiceless, Archbishop Oscar Romero.
Ningún soldado está obligado a obedecer una orden contra la ley de Dios. Nadie tiene que cumplirla.
Archbishop Romero's assassination meant the loss of Liberation Theology's most prominent leader. With his death, the movement seemed to go into decline.
Those statements about it being dead or forgotten were a little overstated.
Lee says there's renewed interest in the doctrine because of the growth in poverty worldwide and Pope Francis's declarations against its root causes.
The election of Pope Francis, who has injected a kind of new life, new energy, but new attention to Latin America and specifically liberation theology, his openness has really sparked a renewed interest in what liberation theology is, what it has to offer. And I would say the problem, the question of liberation is still pressing. It's so relevant that liberation theology has something to contribute.
Liberation theology may have something to contribute, but it is not without its critics, both inside and outside of the church. Reverend Luis Barrios is one of them. As a youth, he seemed destined to lead a life of crime like his brothers. Liberation theology gave him a way out.
This issue of supremacy of men and subordination of women, not letting women be ordained inside the church. And then we're going to talk about liberation theology. This is a very serious contradiction. Being a woman, being someone who is not heterosexual, being someone who is not white, being someone who is not a Christian.
Even liberation theology over its history has had to address these questions. The first generation of liberation theologian is almost exclusively male. So the women's voices have emerged critically and constructively to flesh it out, to make it greater. And I think that process of addressing new questions is an important one. And yes, institutionally it means challenges. It could even mean threats. But at least Christians are forced to confront the gospel, a gospel that doesn't talk about preserving the institution as the primary goal.
Pope Francis has stated as much. His unprecedented choice in a name, Francis, after St. Francis of Assisi, the little poor one, the protector of animals and the environment, suggests a new tone and direction for the church. A direction, Lee says, many of today's youth can relate to.
I find that college students have these intuitions about questions of poverty, the environment, etc., that these are relevant and that their faith needs to relate to that. Their faith cannot be separate from these pressing issues. And that's why I think a figure like Pope Francis reignites interest in liberation theology and the way that it can think about both the pressing social problems and a faith that is relevant and that can respond to those in a meaningful way, and thus empower people to have a meaningful faith.
Judith Escalona, Independent Sources.
That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned. Till next time, be independent-minded.